What if everything you were taught about Jesus is incomplete? What if the truth was never on an altar, but lying on the side of the road waiting for a ride? That early morning, I wasn't looking for answers. I was just trying to keep my eyes open on the night shift, dodging potholes and thinking about the life I didn't live. Another passenger, another journey. That's what I thought, until I saw ... it. He looked like a man, but he wasn't. Gray skin, wide, dark eyes, impossible to read. And when he looked at me, I felt it. Not fear, but a presence, a frequency. As if time itself had stopped to watch that scene. Would you believe me if I told you he got into my car ... and started talking about Jesus? Not with words, with thoughts, with images, with a calm that disarmed me, and with a phrase that gave me goosebumps. The heaven you seek is not where you think. I know, it sounds crazy. It sounds like a science fiction script. But there's something you need to understand. He didn't appear to me. I was the one who appeared to him. And to this day I ask myself, why? Why me? Why me, who had already lost faith years ago? Of all people, who only prayed when life hit me, who only remembered God when everything was falling apart. But maybe that's exactly why. Because I'm like you, tired, full of questions that no one answers, with the feeling that there is something bigger ... But it always seems a little out of reach. If you've ever looked up at the sky and felt like it was empty, if you've ever prayed and felt like you were talking to walls, if you've ever asked for a sign and all you got was silence. So this story is yours too. Because what this being showed me about Jesus, it's not in the Bible they put in your hand. It's not in the emotional sermons. It's not on the church walls. It's in you, and they hid it. For centuries. I know it's hard to accept. We've been conditioned to kneel and wait, to ask and not question. But what if Jesus never wanted us to wait? What if what he really taught was how to manifest, how to co-create? How do you connect with a source that is within, not without? Maybe you're suspicious of me now, and I understand. I doubted it too, but he gave me proof. An experiment I did there in the driver's seat, and the result was so absurd that to this day I get goosebumps just remembering it. But before I tell you that, you need to understand how this conversation started. What he said as soon as he got in the car, the way he looked at me and asked without moving his mouth, "Do you know why your prayers never work?" If you've ever felt like you were praying wrong, living wrong, believing wrong, stay with me. Because what I discovered in the next 48 hours completely changed my view of Jesus, of God, and most importantly, of myself. And maybe it will change yours too. Maybe this story found you today for a reason. Now take a deep breath, because I'm going to tell you exactly how it all started on that road. But before I tell you exactly how it all started on that road, let me ask you something. If, at any point in this video, you feel that chill down your spine, that strange feeling of "I've already thought of that," this makes too much sense to be just a coincidence, comment below. Even if it's just "I'm feeling that too," or "that reminded me of something I experienced." Because when you share what you feel, you activate something. You turn this video into a chain of memories, and maybe someone else who's lost like I was that morning will read your comment and wake up too. Now if you're here to this point, it's because something inside you is asking you to continue. So leave a like, not for ego, not for numbers, but because the system's algorithm needs to know that this kind of truth matters. If you don't like it, that content disappears. And what was revealed there inside my car can't disappear. And activate your subscription, because this story doesn't end here. This was just the beginning of a series of revelations that I guarantee you no one ever told you. Are you ready to know what the alien told me in the first minutes of the trip? So hold on tight, because what's coming next will tear you apart from the inside. I remember exactly how I felt when he got into the car. It wasn't fear, at least not the kind of fear you feel when you see a gun or hear a strange noise in the middle of the night. It was a kind of ... awe, like something very ancient and very powerful had crossed my path, and now nothing would ever be the same again. His scent wasn't sweat or earth or metal. It was something I'd never smelled before, like ozone after rain mixed with incense from a temple I'd never visited. And his eyes, I can't explain them. It was as if every time I looked I saw less of the surface and more ... what lay beneath. A consciousness. A presence that saw all of me, even what I'd forgotten. He sat in the passenger seat without saying a word. He just stared straight ahead. The rain beat against the windshield and the wipers seemed louder than usual. There was a silence between us that wasn't uncomfortable. It was full, heavy, and then without moving his lips he spoke. Not with sound, but inside my head, as if he had direct access to my thoughts. Have you ever wondered why you're here? I almost slammed on the brakes. My mind was spinning. This was an invasion, a collapse of everything I understood as real. But more than that, it was a question that hurt. Because yes, I ask myself this all the time. Why me? Why this life? Why so much silence from God? I swallowed hard and kept driving. I didn't know whether to respond, pretend I hadn't heard, or freak out, but he already knew. He knew everything. And he continued in that voice that wasn't a voice at all, but a clear, calm thought. You were chosen because you still have the flame. It's weak, but it's alive. I didn't know what he was talking about, but a part of me did. It was that spark that kept burning even on the darkest days. The same one that made me look to the sky even after so many ignored prayers. Jesus never wanted you to wait for him, he said. He wanted you to wake up to yourself. That sentence hit me like a punch. I grew up hearing that Jesus was my savior, my path, my hope, that all I needed to do was be faithful, go to church and wait. Wait for the miracle. Wait for the blessing. Wait for salvation. But there on that dark road with another worldly being in the passenger seat, I was hearing something different, something that made me tremble inside. He turned his face to me and looked straight into my eyes. And I swear, for a second I felt like he was looking through time, seeing every version of me that had ever existed. The boy who cried in his room because his parents were fighting. The teenager who wanted to disappear. The man who knelt in the dark begging for help to carry on. You were never alone, he said. And then he began to show me, not with images or holograms yet, but with sensations, reactivated memories, synapses that lit up in a strange way. I relived moments when I should have died and didn't. Moments when something prevented me from making a bad decision. Small coincidences that saved me, and that I had always ignored. And he said all this was an answer. But you were expecting answers with a voice of thunder. And God has always spoken in silence. The road remained deserted. The city lights were far behind. Now only the headlights illuminated the wet asphalt. And inside the car the world seemed different. He spoke to me about heaven, but not as a place. He explained that heaven is a state of consciousness, a frequency. That Jesus tried to teach this but was misunderstood. The kingdom of God is within you, he said, repeating words I had heard before but never felt. And then came the question that broke me. Do you know why your prayers never worked? That question echoed inside me. And before I could respond with anger or sadness, he added, because you ask as one who has nothing. You ask out of fear, with doubt. And that is exactly what you manifest. My heart raced. He started talking about frequency, manifestation, energy, how Jesus used it, how miracles weren't magic but spiritual physics that no one ever taught you. And that's when he said, if you want, I can show you. Not just explain, but show you with proof. I didn't respond. I just drove in silence, sensing something was about to happen. And when he lightly tapped the dashboard, the radio, which had been off, came on by itself. A soft instrumental began to play. And at that moment I saw the number 47 appear on the radio display. No reason, no station, just 47. It was just the beginning. But before the next revelation, I want to ask you something. If any part of this story made you feel something, a chill, a lump in your throat, a forgotten memory, write it here in the comments. It can be just one word. It could be I feel that too, or I've wondered why my prayers don't work. Write I've also seen the number 47 if it's ever appeared to you. These comments create more than engagement. They create resonance. They say to the universe, I'm ready to remember. And of course, leave a like if this story touched you in any way. Not for me, but because when you do this, you show that this truth needs to reach more people. And if you haven't signed up yet, now's the time. Because what he showed me afterwards goes beyond anything you've ever heard in churches. The number 47 still flashed on the radio display as if held by some invisible force. It was impossible for this to be happening, and yet at the same time, it was as if everything made sense I didn't yet understand. The silence inside the car had become dense, charged with meanings that surpassed any logical explanation. I kept driving, my hands sweaty on the steering wheel, trying to keep my breathing under control as my mind clung to the shreds of rationality. You asked for proof, didn't you? He said, his voice coming straight from inside my head. Here's the first one. Simple, clear, but enough to break through the barrier of doubt. And then I realized I hadn't asked for anything out loud. I just thought I wanted proof. He was in my thoughts. It sent a shiver down my spine, starting at the base of my neck. I was dealing with something that wasn't just from another planet. It was from another dimension of consciousness. How did you know? I finally asked, my voice hoarse, low, almost a whisper. How did you know I was thinking about it? The answer came softly, because thought is vibration, and every vibration can be felt, read, and interpreted. On our plane, this is natural. For you, it's still a mystery. My chest tightened. It was as if he were dismantling the illusion of separation between what we think and what we are. As if to say, you are what you vibrate. Not what you say, not what you pretend, but what you truly feel, deep within your energetic field. The road continued dark, almost endless. Only the car's headlights cut through the darkness. And within that closed universe, I began to sense something deeper was brewing there. The number 47 slowly disappeared from the display as if it had never existed. The radio turned off by itself, and he calmly turned to face me and said, "Do you want to understand why your prayers don't work? Because what you say is the opposite of what you want." I remained silent, listening, absorbing. You ask for health, but feel sickness. You ask for money, but feel scarcity. You say you want love, but feel abandoned. The universe, God, source, call it what you will, doesn't hear words. It senses frequencies, and it responds precisely to what you vibrate most intensely. I felt ashamed, not of him, of myself, because as hard as it was to admit, it was true. I found myself remembering the nights I'd prayed almost angrily. I'd begged for help, but deep down, I already believed nothing would change. I was already praying in defeat. And he knew it. Jesus knew this. He taught this. He demonstrated every day that the secret was to feel as if it had already happened. That's why miracles happen. He gave thanks beforehand. He felt the manifestation already real before it was visible. That struck me in a strange way, because although it seemed like a distant concept, it reminded me of a biblical story I'd heard as a child, the multiplication of the loaves. It always intrigued me that before anything happened, Jesus looked to the heavens and gave thanks. I thought he was being polite, but now I understood. It was a frequency. It was a manifestation. It was a vibration of certainty. But no one ever taught me that, I said aloud, more to myself than to him. They always told me to pray humbly, to ask, to accept God's will, and passively accept what they call fate, he added. But that was never what Jesus taught. That was what they replaced him with later. Because a human being who knows their own power cannot be controlled. The air grew heavier. This wasn't just about protest. It was about freedom. It was about control. About how perhaps an entire system had been built to keep people unaware of their own power. Jesus came to show the way back in, he said. But they built temples to look out. I sat quietly for a while, digesting all this. The car continued on, now with an almost supernatural calm. The engine seemed lighter. Time slowed. It was as if I were driving within a sacred space, where the normal laws of reality no longer applied. And then he asked me to stop the car. There was a clearing ahead, an open field surrounded by silence. I stopped the vehicle and he got out. I followed. The sky was clear, even after the rain. The stars shone as if they were there for a reason. And then, without warning, he extended his hand. In his palm, a small crystal, faintly blue, pulsing like a living heart. "This will help you amplify your intention. It's not magic. It's not a miracle. It's just a catalyst. But what really matters is how you feel." I picked up the crystal. It was warm, soft, vibrant. And in that moment, he asked me to do something that completely changed the way I understood prayer. Choose something simple, something unlikely, a number, a symbol, and vibrate as if you had already seen it. Don't ask. Feel it. Be grateful as if it were reality. I chose 47 again. I don't know why. Maybe because something in me already knew. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath, and for a few seconds I did. I connected. I imagined seeing the number 47 in an unexpected situation. I saw it. I felt the chill. I felt the warmth. I felt the gratitude as if it had just happened. And when I opened my eyes, the countryside around us seemed different, as if it had become sharper, more colorful, as if I had passed through an invisible veil between two worlds. "Now watch," he said. "Within 24 hours, reality will rearrange itself." I said nothing. I put the crystal in my pocket, feeling something deep had been activated. Not with words, but with frequency. And it was there, in that silent field, under the stars and beside a being that wasn't human, that I understood what Jesus really meant when he said, "Your faith has healed you." It wasn't a metaphor. It was spiritual physics. It was a code that had been hidden from us, camouflaged in dogma, distorted by traditions that had lost their original meaning. And it's at this point in the story that I want to ask you a favor, because maybe you too have felt that there's something wrong with the way you were taught to pray. Maybe you've prayed and received no answer. Maybe you've begun to doubt whether God still listens or if he ever did. If this has ever happened to you, comment below. It could just be "this has happened to me" or "I've felt this in prayer." If you want something more direct, write "my prayer wasn't working" and help me understand how many people are going through this. And if this video is making you feel something different, like it now. This tells the algorithm that this content matters. And believe me, it helps more than you think. And of course, if you haven't signed up yet, sign up now. Because what he showed me after that is even more unbelievable. And you deserve to know. That night seemed endless. And yet at the same time, everything was passing too quickly. After I held that crystal and felt for the first time in years, A different kind of faith, not the automatic faith of someone repeating learned phrases, but a raw certainty felt deep in my heart. I began to perceive the world in a strange way. It was as if things vibrated at a frequency I'd previously ignored, as if everything had an invisible pulse, a hidden life that I was only now beginning to see. The being who had remained silent since the experiment turned to me with even deeper, darker, almost liquid eyes. And he said something that has echoed within me to this day. Now that you've seen it, there's no unseeing it. And I knew he wasn't just talking about the number 47. He was referring to awakening, the thing no one can do for you, the thing that, once initiated, becomes a point of no return. It was like discovering you'd been asleep your whole life, and now you couldn't close your eyes anymore. We walked back to the car in silence, and when I sat in the driver's seat, I felt something strange. The seat felt different, lighter. It was as if even the car had shifted in density, as if he and I were occupying another version of reality, slightly brighter, cleaner. I know it sounds crazy, but that's exactly what I felt. As soon as I started the engine, he spoke again. "Do you think it was a coincidence that you met me today?" The question hung in the air for a few seconds. I didn't know what to say. Deep down, I knew it wasn't a coincidence, but I also didn't know what it was exactly. Was it fate? Was it punishment? Was it reward? "You found me because you were ready to remember." That word remember resonated with me, because he didn't say learn, he said remember, as if everything he was revealing to me was already somehow inside me. Forgotten, dormant, buried beneath layers and layers of conditioning, religious beliefs, guilt, fear, rules, obligations, promises made by people who were also asleep. "Jesus wanted you to remember too," he added, "but they turned it into a religion." That hit me hard. I grew up in church. I listened to sermons. I attended catechism classes. I participated in meetings, retreats, fasting, and prayer campaigns. But everything I was taught had a pattern. I was small, sinful, limited, and God was unattainable, distant, selective. The message was always the same. Wait, endure, suffer with faith. And now I was hearing that Jesus never wanted to teach us to endure, but rather to co-create, to manifest, to access an energy field where reality responds to the frequency of our certainty. "Do you want to see for yourself?" he asked, looking at me intently. I didn't know what he meant, but I responded with a simple yes, almost in a whisper. It wasn't a courageous response. It was the response of someone who was already stripped of all resistance. He asked me to follow a dirt road, almost invisible at night. I obeyed without question. After a few minutes, he pointed to a small clearing surrounded by trees. I parked. He got out and motioned for me to follow him. In the darkness, he reached out again. And there, projected in the air like a living hologram, appeared something that took my breath away. It was Jesus. But not that Jesus pictured on the wall with his sad gaze and folded hands. He was a real man, with intense eyes, a marked face, and a magnetic presence. He was surrounded by a few people, sitting by a lake, and he spoke. I couldn't hear the words, but I felt what he was saying. It was as if knowledge was piercing through me. "Is this real?" I asked, almost voiceless. "Yes," the being replied. "A recording, not like yours, but an energetic record. We captured light, sound, vibrational field, everything. It's been intact for 2 millennia. And then, as if the hologram responded to my inner desire, the scene changed. Jesus now stood with his hands on his chest, his eyes closed. And I felt a vibration that almost brought me to my knees. It was certainty. It was gratitude. It was as if the entire universe were flowing through him. "Watch," the being said. "He's not asking. He's feeling as if he's already received. This is true prayer. This is manifestation." And in that instant, a light began to emanate from his chest. It was subtle at first, then more intense. And then it touched a woman standing before him. She was visibly ill, weary. But as soon as that light enveloped her, her body changed. Her expression changed. She was healed before my eyes. Not because Jesus did something external. He simply activated what already existed within her. He connected her to a frequency where the illness could no longer exist. He reminded her of who she was. "This is how he healed," the being said. "Not with magic, but with frequency, with absolute faith. And this can be done by any human being." He himself said, "You will do greater works than these." I'd heard this verse before, but I'd never understood it. I'd always thought it was a metaphor, something symbolic. Now I saw it was literal. An invitation. The scene changed once more. Jesus stood before a withered fig tree, and I knew what was coming. He cursed it, and it died. But it wasn't revenge. It was a demonstration. Immediately afterward, he turned to his disciples and said, "If you have faith and do not doubt, you will say to this mountain, 'Be removed and thrown into the sea,' and it will be done." And in that moment, it all made sense. The power to manifest wasn't a gift for the few. It was everyone's natural state. But it had been forgotten, suppressed, distorted. I looked back at the figure beside me. I wanted to say something, but I was at a loss for words. He looked at me with compassion, like someone who understands the inner storm that begins when truth breaks through the walls of lies. "You need to practice," he said. "Knowing isn't enough. You need to vibrate." And that's when he gave me a second crystal, bigger, stronger. And he said that with it, I could deepen the connection, raise the frequency, maintain clarity, but that the work would be mine. No one could manifest for me. No one could think for me. I would have to relearn how to feel. And it was there, in that clearing illuminated by holograms of hidden truths, that I understood. The miracle was never something that came from outside. The miracle was always within. If you've made it this far, I need to know something. Have you ever felt like there's something wrong with what you've been taught about prayer, faith, and Jesus? Have you ever felt like there's something beyond traditional religion? If so, comment below. You could write, "Jesus taught more than they say," or simply, "I feel like I've been deceived." It could also be, "I want to learn to vibrate differently." These phrases, as simple as they may seem, create an energetic field between all of us who are awakening. And if this video touched you, like it now, because every like helps this message reach more people who are ready to remember. And if you haven't signed up yet, sign up now, because what he showed me after that is something that not even the most beautiful words can describe. That night seemed endless, but I never once wished it would end. After seeing Jesus heal so often, after understanding that true faith isn't a desperate plea but a quiet certainty, something inside me had shifted. Not like a pretty thought or a Sunday lesson, but as if someone had removed the blindfold from my eyes. And now everything that had once seemed distant, unattainable, mystical, was suddenly close, familiar, accessible, as if the sacred had always been there, right in the center of my own breath. Back in the car with the crystal now in my left pocket, I felt different. The silence between us wasn't empty, it was full. A silence that spoke volumes. The being stared out the window, observing the trees as if saying goodbye to them. And for the first time since it all began, he seemed human. Not in body, but in emotion. "Do you notice how everything changes when you change your frequency?" he asked without looking at me. I just nodded. Yes, it was impossible not to notice. I thought differently, I felt differently. Even the air seemed lighter, time no longer weighed me down, the doubt was no longer so strong. And for the first time in many years, I felt peace. Not the peace that comes after an achievement, but the peace that arises when you stop fighting your own existence. "Now comes the hard part," he said. I turned my head to him, expecting something catastrophic. A warning, a demand, an impossible mission. But he just looked back at me and said, "You're going to have to unlearn." That took me by surprise. I was expecting something new, a next step, an advanced lesson. But did he want me to forget? Unlearn what? I asked, afraid of the answer. Everything they told you about yourself? Silence. A weight fell from the air as if that sentence had displaced gravity inside the car. "You were taught that you are a sinner, that you are weak, that you were born with inherited guilt, that God is far away, that you need to ask, suffer, wait, obey. And you believed. You believed so much that you created a life based on it." His words cut like a knife, but with the precision of a scalpel. It was spiritual surgery. A slow removal of a lie that had lived within me for too long. "You're not a sinner," he said. "You're forgetful. That's different." I didn't know what to say, and I don't think he expected an answer. He just wanted me to listen, to absorb, for my soul to understand what my intellect still tried to resist. Jesus didn't come to condemn you. He came to remind you. He didn't point his finger, he extended his hand. He didn't shout from the pulpit, he whispered in your heart. He didn't tell you to wait in the temple, he invited you to walk on the water. With each word, something inside me broke. But it was a good kind of breaking. Like when a fever finally breaks. Like when a headache disappears and you feel relief in the back of your neck. I was falling apart inside, but not from sadness, from liberation. "You're going to go back to your life," he continued, "but it won't be the same, because you won't be the same anymore. And that's going to be scary." And he was right. I could already foresee what awaited me. People saying I was crazy, that I was being deceived, that I was mixing God with esotericism, that I was blaspheming. And to be honest, I myself was scared, because unlearning hurts. Questioning everything you've ever believed is like taking off your skin and walking in the wind. But at the same time, nothing was truer than what I was feeling right now. "You need to start practicing vigilance," he said. "Watch and pray," I replied automatically. He smiled, or at least made a gesture that resembled a smile. His brow softened. His gaze, too. This phrase has been misinterpreted for centuries. Watching isn't just observing the external world. It's watching your own thoughts, catching the negative ones before they gain strength. And praying Praying is decreeing the reality you desire with emotion, with gratitude, with certainty. I'd never thought of it that way. I'd always seen prayer as a plea, as a polite request, as a favor that with luck might be granted. But he was telling me that prayer was much more than that. It was declaring, it was feeling, it was vibrating. Jesus prayed like this, he added, and because of this, everything was made manifest. And then he proposed something new, a second experiment, more intense, more challenging. So you will now choose a new manifestation, not a number, something more meaningful, something you find unlikely. And you will do as you did before, feel as if you already have it. Be grateful as if it were already real. I closed my eyes, I thought, and without thinking much, something came to me. Peace with my father. It was a desire I didn't even know I still had. We hadn't spoken in years. A silent break without a fight, but with a lot of hurt. He never reached out to me, and I never tried again. I thought it was something buried. But there, with that being by my side, everything that had been dormant began to emerge. Then feel it, he said. See the scene, feel the emotion, feel the warmth, and be grateful I imagined it. The two of us sitting, drinking coffee, talking as if nothing had happened. Laughing. I felt ridiculous at first. Fake, but after a few seconds a real emotion emerged, a warmth in my chest, a lightness. And then I said to myself, thank you, God, for this reconciliation. The being nodded. He didn't say anything, but I knew he felt it. Now watch, he said. In the next few days, something will move. And when it does, you will know it was you who caused it, because everything responds to your frequency. I took a deep breath. The world seemed brighter, as if the stars were now vibrating together. The air was cleaner. Even the sound of the leaves seemed more musical. I got back in the car, I sat down, I started the engine. And then he said the last thing before the silence returned. Remember, thought creates. Emotion amplifies. Certainty manifests. That's the formula. Use it wisely. The road back was slow. Not because I slowed down, but because time felt different. Stretched. Gentle. I knew life would go on. That the bills would keep coming. That the challenges wouldn't disappear. But something essential had changed. I now knew I could co-create my reality. If you've read this far, tell me something in the comments. What manifestation would you choose today? You could write, I want peace with someone, or I want complete health, or I want abundance. Whatever desire came to your heart while reading, write it in the comments. This activates something. This declares. If you prefer something more direct, comment, I choose to vibrate differently. And if this video resonated with you, like it now. It's not just a button, it's a frequency. And that frequency pushes this content to more people who are ready to remember. And if you haven't signed up yet, do it now, because what he showed me next was something that to this day, even after everything, I still have trouble explaining. Dawn was almost turning to morning when I pulled up to my house. The sky, still dark, seemed to be opening up in shades of purple and blue, as if the universe were telling me, you're not the same anymore. And indeed, I wasn't. Each step to the front door felt new, familiar yet different. The worn rug at the entrance, the creak of the hinge, the smell of my own home, everything felt charged with a new kind of energy, as if I could now see the vibration behind the shapes. I went inside. I left my keys on the table. The kitchen light was dim, and for a second I considered turning on all the lamps, trying to cling to normality. But something inside me resisted. I wanted to stay in the dark, in the silence. I needed to hear what was happening inside, in my body, in my mind, in my heart. Something was reverberating. I sat in the old armchair in the living room, the same one that had seen me sink into despair so many times. But now I was there, in a different way. No longer a victim of the world, but as someone who had begun to remember her own power. I took the crystal from my pocket and placed it on the coffee table. It still pulsed gently, and just looking at it, I felt my whole body react, as if there were a silent communication taking place, beyond human language. In his mind, his phrase still echoed, now that you've seen it, there's no unseeing it. And it was true. The vision of Jesus projected into that clearing, healing with energy, praying with certainty, teaching with simple gestures. All of that wasn't an image. It was an experience imprinted on me, engraved on another layer of consciousness. I got up and went to my room. It was still night. It was still dark, but I couldn't sleep. So I sat on the edge of the bed, closed my eyes, and tried to repeat what he taught me. I thought about my father. Visualize a scene, the two of us drinking coffee, talking, no hard feelings, no past. And for the first time, I was able to feel gratitude without forcing it. It simply appeared, like a reminder of something that hadn't happened yet, but already existed. Then I returned to the living room, sat on the floor with my back against the wall. I stayed there for a long time, observing my thoughts, one at a time, without judgment. And whenever a negative thought arose, this is all crazy, nothing will change, you'll fail again, I replaced it, gently. Without fighting my mind, I simply changed the channel. This is real. I'm changing. My frequency is higher. I am the co-creator of my reality. I repeated this until my mind grew tired, and when I realized it, it was already day. In the days that followed, the trials began, but not as you might imagine. They weren't visible miracles, lightning in the sky, angels singing. They were details, subtle things, small coincidences that if you're still asleep, you might miss. But if you're awake, you know they're no coincidence. On Tuesday, I received a message on my cell phone. A strange number. When I opened it, it was an audio message. It was my father. The voice was hesitant, as if he'd thought 1,000 times before recording. He said he was sorting out some things at home, found an old photo of me, and felt like calling me. That was it. But in that was it. There was the whole world. I took a deep breath and understood. Reality was already rearranging itself. The frequency was already working. That night, I dreamed of the being again. It wasn't an ordinary dream. It was vivid. And he didn't say anything. He just looked at me, as if to say, see? It works. I woke up before the alarm clock rang. On the clock, the numbers glowed. 5:47. Again. It was impossible not to notice. I started paying attention to everything. The way people looked at me. The way things flowed. The way in which, even without doing anything new, opportunities began to appear. A friend I hadn't seen in years texted me out of the blue asking if I was still into electrical work. He needed someone to fix an old machine. It was simple, but it paid well, and more than that, it was a sign. I began to understand what he meant by you vibrate reality, because before I vibrated scarcity, lack, fear, doubt, and everything around me responded with exactly that. But now, little by little, I was shifting the field. I started exercising every day, 5 minutes in the morning, 5 before bed. Nothing complex, nothing too mystical. Just feeling like life was already the way I wanted it. And thank you. Don't beg. To thank. The hardest part was maintaining this throughout the day because the mind slips. It falls back into old patterns. It starts complaining, comparing, sabotaging itself. But I started using what he taught me. Vigilance. Every thought is a seed. Every emotion is water. And what you water ... grows. I started cutting off at the root everything I no longer wanted to see grow in my life. And do you know what started to happen? People started to notice. You look different. It's calmer. It feels lighter. But what they didn't know is that it wasn't just being different, it was a reminder. I was returning home, not a physical home, but a spiritual home. The one that had always been within me, but I had forgotten the way, and it all started with a ride, with a being who found me on the road, or rather, ... that I allowed to be found. If you've made it this far with me, I want to invite you to be a part of this. Comment below naturally what you would like to express. It could be something simple, like I want peace, or something more direct like I want to reprogram my frequency. Or write, teach me to vibrate, if you feel that something inside you is asking for this new beginning. It doesn't matter how. What matters is declaring. And if this story is moving you, like this video now, this helps deliver this truth to those who are also ready to remember. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it now, because what he showed me next, it was more than a revelation. It was an invitation. The following days were silent on the outside, but noisy on the inside. I didn't tell anyone what had happened, not because I wanted to hide it, but because there were no words that fit this new language I was learning. How could I explain to someone that you'd given a ride to a being from another plane and that he'd shown you the true meaning of Jesus? How could I tell them that the manifestations were beginning to appear? That my father had reached out to me after years of no contact? That the numbers I'd seen in my dreams were now appearing on clocks, license plates, and cell phone screens? How could I explain without sounding crazy or enlightened? So I kept quiet, but inside I talked all the time. To myself, to the universe, to God, no longer as someone begging, but as someone learning. Each day was a kind of spiritual laboratory. I observed everything, the way I woke up, the first thoughts of the day, the emotions that came uninvited. I began to understand that the path wasn't something you walked with your feet. It was a vibrational path, a field you learned to sustain. That's when I started remembering something the being had said to me in the car, right at the beginning, but which I hadn't fully understood at the time. He said, "The heaven you seek is not a place, it is a frequency." Jesus knew this. That sentence kept running through my mind like a broken record, and now it made sense, because I was experiencing it firsthand. Heaven wasn't after death. It wasn't a place with golden gates. It was a state, a level of consciousness, and hell, too. Hell was waking up every day feeling inadequate. Hell was living, waiting for something that never comes. Hell was repeating the same patterns of pain, thinking it was fate. And heaven. Heaven was being able to look at the same world as always, but with new eyes. It was feeling gratitude for no reason. It was smiling in the midst of chaos because, deep down, something inside you knows you are no longer sleeping. I began to understand why he chose me, or rather, why I allowed myself to be chosen, because in the end it wasn't him who woke me up. It was my exhaustion, my emptiness, my silent collapse. It was the pain accumulated over the years that finally overflowed to the point where I became willing to listen. And when you are available, the universe responds. But this is where the most intense part begins, because once you remember, you start to be tested. I was driving to work 3 days after the visit. The same route as always. The same streets. The same traffic lights. And then out of nowhere I felt a tightness in my chest. It wasn't anxiety, it was a presence, a calling. I stopped the car at a gas station, I turned off the engine. I closed my eyes. And he was there, inside my mind. Not with words, with vibrations. And I understood. He wanted me to return to the clearing. That same night, after work, I went. I didn't think twice. I grabbed the crystal, put it in my pocket, and drove there as if I were going home. And maybe I was. When I arrived, he was already there, still, calm, waiting for me as if no time had passed. "Do you remember what you felt?" he asked before I could even say anything. I nodded. "Then you're ready for the next level." I took a deep breath. I didn't know what that meant, but my body was already saying yes. "You need to understand the collective field," he continued. "It's not enough to change your individual frequency. You live immersed in an egregore, a mental and emotional field constructed by millions of dormant minds." The word echoed within me, egregore. He explained that it was like a spiritual Wi-Fi network, a tangle of thoughts, emotions, and beliefs, and that most people lived connected to a system that fueled fear, scarcity, suffering, and guilt. The real enemy isn't external. It's this invisible field that influences every choice, every reaction, every decision you make without even realizing it. And then he showed me, not with words, with direct experience. Suddenly, everything around me went dark. The clearing disappeared, and I found myself inside a city, but it was a colorless city. Everything was gray, dense, heavy. People walked with their heads down, connected to dark wires that came from their heads and rose to the sky where a large, dense cloud swirled, feeding on it. "This is the collective field," he explained. "You feed it daily. Every complaint, every thought of worthlessness, every judgment, every envy, every fear, it all rises. Everything contributes." I felt suffocated. It was like being in a nightmare. But he held my shoulder and said, "You can get out of this. You can choose to shut it down, but you have to be aware, all the time. You have to be vigilant." And in that moment, the image began to fade. The clearing returned. The trees, the starry sky, the damp ground beneath my feet. Jesus was talking about this when he said, "The world lies in the power of the evil one." But he wasn't talking about a demon with a trident. He was talking about this energetic structure built over centuries of unconsciousness. I sat on the floor. I needed to take it all in. It was as if I now had an invisible map in my hands, a gateway to a reality no one had ever shown. He sat down next to me. We were silent for a while. Then he added, "When you change your vibration, you begin to affect the field. Your light begins to interfere with the darkness. And that attracts attention." "Whose?" I asked. "From everything that profits from your numbness. You will feel resistance. They will try to distract you, discredit you, make you forget." A chill ran down my spine. It was as if he were warning me that the real challenge would begin now. It wasn't waking up. It was staying awake. Before he left, he handed me something. Not an object, but a phrase. Remember this: the word became flesh, not as dogma, but as code. Everything you repeat with faith, with emotion, and with persistence becomes matter. This phrase stayed with me on the way home. The word became flesh. The word became a body. Vibration turned into form. It was as if I had finally understood what no one had ever explained. Manifesting is embodying what you desire with such certainty that the universe has no choice but to obey. If you felt something while reading this, I want to invite you to comment, but comment with presence. Not through engagement, but through activation. Right here. "I choose to leave the collective field, or I am learning to monitor my thoughts." It can also be, "The word became flesh in me." This sentence has power. And if this video is reminding you of something you didn't even know you knew, like it now, this like isn't just for me. It's to push this truth to those who are still trapped in the threads of the dark field. And if you haven't signed up yet, sign up, because what he showed me next involves something no book on earth dared to tell. The next morning, something was different in the air. It was as if the world was still the same, but my senses had sharpened. I walked the streets with the feeling that everything was telling me something. The signs, the looks on people's faces, even the bird songs seemed like codes waiting to be deciphered. It wasn't madness, it wasn't empty mysticism, it was consciousness. It was as if I had finally begun to walk on two layers at once, the visible and the invisible. I returned to my routine, but it wasn't routine anymore. Every gesture was now observed. Not out of fear, but out of presence. When I brushed my teeth, I thought, what frequency am I vibrating at right now? When I received a message, I felt, what's the intention behind this? And most importantly, I began to notice what I'd previously overlooked. The traps of the collective field. The TV on everywhere, the radio in the neighbor's car, the random comments in the elevator, the memes that went viral on social media. They all seemed designed for one thing: to lower your frequency, to bring you back to automatic, to scarcity, to anxiety, to haste. And I understood that wasn't random, it was a project. An invisible architecture carefully assembled to ensure you remain vibrating at the lowest possible level. Because the lower you vibrate, the more predictable you become, more manipulable, more fragile. And the more fragile, the more dependent on external systems that promise salvation. But he had already warned me. When your frequency rises, you start to bother others, because you stop being food. It was only then that I realized why so much resistance was beginning to emerge. At work, they started treating me differently. Small ironies, misplaced jokes. Comments like, now you're too zen, huh? Or are you a guru now? At first I laughed, but then I began to realize it wasn't just a joke. It was the field at work. It was the system trying to pull me back, because the system hates it when someone wakes up. And it was on one of those days when I thought about simply going back to normal, pretending nothing had happened, that he appeared again. Not physically like the first time, but in the mind. Strong, present, intense. Did you think it would be easy to stay awake within a system designed to keep you asleep? That question broke me, because I knew it wasn't easy. And yet, part of me wanted it to be easy. I wanted an awakening without pain, without cuts, without conflict. You need to understand what we call the silent war, he said. It doesn't happen with weapons, it happens in minds, in thoughts, in choices that seem small but shape the whole. And then he showed me scenes. Again, not like a movie, but as if I were in them. People waking up on autopilot, grabbing their phones before they even take a deep breath, connecting to feeds, news, messages, all charged with fear, scarcity, comparison. An emotional tsunami in the first few minutes of the day. And then comes the coffee, the rush, the traffic, the guilt, the job you don't love, the shallow relationships, the broken promises. And in the end, more phones, more distractions, more disposable content. And when they finally lie down, an emptiness, a weariness of the soul. That's the cycle, he said. And most people don't realize it, because they've been taught that this is how they live. I remained silent. It hurt, because it was true. But then ... how do we get out of this? I asked. How do we win this invisible war? The answer was simple. By spiritual discipline, by intention, by constant vigilance, by choosing to remember every day who you are. He then showed me an image I've never forgotten, a candle small alone in the middle of a dark desert. And yet that tiny flame illuminated everything around it. And then other candles began to light one by one, as if that first one had given permission for the others to exist as well. You are that candle. And no matter how much the wind of the system tries to extinguish it, your light has already touched others. And this process can no longer be stopped. I returned to the present with tears in my eyes, and with an understanding that changed everything. The fight was never against something out there. It's always been about keeping the flame inside me burning. So I started changing little things. Turn off your cell phone for an hour when you wake up. Observe 5 minutes of silence before making any decision. Looking at what was bothering me and asking, what is this trying to show me? And more than anything, I started to forgive myself. Forgive me for sleeping so long, for having believed so many lies, for sabotaging me so many times. And in that process, I understood something powerful that the being had spoken, but now it echoed with another depth. He came to free you from oblivion. That sentence broke me inside because everything made sense now. Jesus did not shout repent as a threat, but as an invitation. To repent in the original was metanoia, a change of mind. He wanted us to change our way of thinking, because changing your thinking changes your frequency, and changing the frequency changes reality. But what did they do with it? They built buildings. They created hierarchies. They invented rules. And they hid the truth behind fear and guilt. And now it's up to us to remember. Each one who awakens frees one more. Each word with intention lights another candle. Each conscious vibration weakens the collective field. And if you're reading this now, it's no wonder. You felt that calling too. So comment here. I choose to be the lit candle, or I'm not going back to sleep. It could also be Jesus freed me from oblivion. Every comment with intention is a seed in the field. Every word you say here reverberates. You're not commenting to me. You're declaring to the universe, I woke up, and if this video sparked something in you, like it now. This like is energy, it's vibration. It's a sign that you're ready to leave the silent war. And if you haven't signed up yet, do it now. Because what he revealed after that was about the origin of the soul. And why forgetting was part of the plan. I realized something was about to happen the very moment the sky stood still. Yes, still. As if time had suspended for a few seconds so my soul could breathe before the next plunge. I was in my backyard holding the crystal without expectation, without wanting to force anything, just surrendering. And it was in this absolute silence that it returned. Not with his voice. Not with a projected image. He entered me. As if my consciousness were a room and he were there, standing, watching me from within. There were no words, but I knew exactly what he wanted to show me. It was time to see what had been hidden for the longest time, that which not even the sacred books dared reveal. The origin of the soul. For a moment my vision went black, not as if I were passing out, but as if my physical eyes had been turned off so that other eyes, older, purer ones, could be activated. And then I saw. It wasn't a planet. It wasn't a body. It was light. I was a living spark, floating in a golden field of pulsating energy. There was no form. There was no ego. There was no name. Just consciousness in its purest, most expanded, most innocent form. And I knew in a way I can't explain that that was me. That light was my soul. Before the fear, before the trauma, before the world. And then he spoke within me. Before birth you knew. I knew what? I thought. But before I could finish the question, the answer came like a wave. You knew you would come to forget. You knew it would be painful. You knew it would be lonely. But you accepted. Because deep down, you also wanted to remember. At that moment, a kind of film began to play before me. But it wasn't just any film, it was my own timeline seen from the outside. And there were the moments I'd never understood, that recurring childhood dream. The unexplained shiver I got when I heard certain songs. The irrational fear of dark places. The constant feeling of being out of place. As if my soul had always known it didn't fully belong in this world. You were not born of the earth, you incarnated on the earth, he said with a sweetness that dismantled me. And that's when the vision expanded. I saw thousands of other lights just like mine, each one descending through a kind of vibrational tunnel as if traversing a vast energetic web. And as they approached the density of the physical plane, some of these lights began to fade, to be forgotten. Memories were silenced. Intuition was stifled. The inner voice was drowned out by external voices, father, mother, religion, school, society. And so the lights became people, forgotten, lost, but with something inside them that never completely faded. A spark, a memory, a whisper. This is the origin of emptiness, he said. The pain you call existential doesn't come from the flesh. It comes from the memory of the soul. That hit me like a bolt of lightning. It made so much sense. It was as if all my crises, all my sleepless nights, all my moments of profound loneliness were now given a name, a cause, a meaning. No one is lost. They're just disconnected, he continued. And the job of every soul that begins to remember is to help others remember too. I felt the tears well up, even without any exaggerated emotion. It was as if my body was releasing what had been trapped for lifetimes. A clean cry, ancient, liberating. And then he showed the cross. But not as a symbol of guilt, not as a burden. The cross was now a portal, a symbol of transition, a hidden code. They distorted the meaning of the crucifixion, he explained. Jesus' death was not a payment for sins. It was an energetic rupture, a gesture of total surrender to the remembrance of who he was. When he said it is finished, he wasn't surrendering to pain. He was completing a vibrational process, transcending the collective field of suffering. He descended into the frequency of fear to show that it was possible to return to love. And then I saw another scene. Jesus was no longer bleeding on the cross. He was standing, radiant, surrounded by light, and he was looking right at me. In that look, there was no judgment. There was no religion. There was only one message. You are also a son. You can also remember. The scene faded. I returned to the backyard. The crystal was still in my hand, but now it felt warmer. As if it had absorbed something, a code, an activation. I stayed there for a long time, sitting on the ground looking at the sky, and I finally understood why I had been asking myself why me since the beginning of this story. Because I needed to break. I needed to lose ground. I needed to go through the dark night of the soul. Because only those who break, can let the light enter through the cracks. And then it hit me. Maybe you're going through exactly that right now. Maybe you're watching this video because you're in a moment where everything seems meaningless. Maybe you've felt this silent pain that won't go away, this longing for something you can't explain. If that's the case, maybe your soul is trying to remember. So right here in the comments, I am light before the body, or I'm starting to remember. It can also be I'm returning to my origin. These words trigger more than you might think. They're not just typed phrases, they're reminders. They're keys. And if this video awakens something in you, leave your like now. Not for me, but for you. Because like is also a frequency. It's you saying to the universe, I saw it, and I choose to continue. And if you haven't signed up yet, do so. Because what he revealed after that involved what happens after death, and why death is not the end, but a return. Night fell again, but this time there was no fear. There was no urgency. Time seemed to be embracing me as if to say, now you can rest, you remembered. Many layers were peeled back, many truths revealed, and none of them came as a ready-made answer. On the contrary, each one came as a key, a vibration, a frequency that forced me to feel more than understand. Quote, and perhaps that's the true meaning of it all. Remembering isn't about accumulating answers, but about being silent enough to hear what's always been speaking within you. Today, looking back, I understand why it was me. Why that ride? Why that being? Why is there silence inside the car? Because deep down, I was just another person who asked for help, even if in silence. Another one who, at some point in his life, looked up to the sky and said, if there is something beyond, show me. And he showed. Not with grandiose miracles, not with flashing lights in the sky or empty promises, but with little truths that were exploding inside me like fireworks. Truths that showed me that Jesus was never what I was told, that sin was not a condemnation but oblivion, that prayer was not a plea but a vibrational command, that death was not an end, it was a passage, and that I, like you, am an eternal being disguised as a temporary human. If you've made it this far with me, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for staying, for feeling, for allowing this story to touch something inside you. You are not alone. You never were. And now that you've seen it, there's no way to unsee it. If this journey reminded you of who you are, leave a word in the comments that represents how you felt. It could be light. It could be return. It could be Jesus. Or even, I woke up. It doesn't matter which word you choose. It matters that it comes from the soul. She will vibrate. She will call whoever also needs to see. And if this story touched your spirit, leave a like. That's important, yes. But not for the number. For the sign. The like is a gesture. It's like lighting a candle in the middle of darkness. It helps this video reach those who are also ready to awaken. And if you haven't signed up yet, sign up now, because this was just one story among many to come, and the next one is ready to be told. Oh, and before you leave, wait for the next video to appear here on the screen. He is the natural continuation of that journey. It will further deepen what you started to feel today. Click on it with presence, with intention, with an open heart, because the path back home begins with a click of courage, with love, and truly. See you in the next video. Now click on the video that appears there. You will understand why nothing you have experienced until now was by chance.